So welcome to our daily video. We begin, as we always begin, with two blessings. The first, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ha'oneh b'eit tzara. Praise to you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who answers us in our time of crisis. Hayom matayim v'arba'a v'shaloshim yomim lahaseger. This is the 234th day in our isolation. And our second blessing, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Praise to you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who commands us to busy ourselves with the study of Torah. So this week is Parshat Vayera, and it's a very, very tricky parsha. We see in this parsha many different faces of God, and they're a little bit contradictory here. That's part of what makes this such an interesting parsha. At the beginning, God heals Abraham. He sends angels that are their job. One of their jobs is to heal Abraham from his circumcision. It shows the compassionate side of God. But later, Abraham is going to challenge God for the by asking the question: shall the judge of all the earth do justly, act justly? Will God kill off the good people with the sinners of Sodom and Gomorrah? Abraham asked this question point blank to God. How can you do such a thing? How can that be considered to be justice? This is not justice. This is compassion. And Abraham then holds God to God's own high standards of compassion and justice. Then God is compassionate again after Ishmael and Hagar are sent out into the wilderness, and they run out of water, and Hagar thinks that they're both going to die of thirst in the desert. And God opens the eyes of Hagar, and she sees the water that is there it saves her life and the life of her son Ishmael. And God's clearly compassionate again. And then God heartlessly orders Abraham to sacrifice Isaac on a mountain 3 days journey away. There's certainly nothing compassionate there at all. I should say here that my friend and colleague, Rabbi Brad Artson, who was the dean of rabbinical school at American Jewish University, he writes a rather interesting story that just sort of brings this all to the front, in that before God asks Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, God asks Sarah to sacrifice Isaac. And when God tells Sarah that she needs to sacrifice Isaac, Sarah replies, "Who are you?" And God says, "Well, I'm God. I'm the creator of heaven and earth." And Sarah says, "Wait a second here. The God I know is compassionate and kind. So I'm going to ask again, who are you?" And God is, in this story, is completely stunned by that question. And he goes to Abraham, and Abraham, of course, does what Abraham does. But he's really brooding over this question, how is Sarah to say, who am I? I mean, I'm God, But eventually, God realizes that, I'm supposed to be a compassionate God. I'm supposed to be a kind God. I can't be going around ordering people to sacrifice their children. At the last second, he grabs a hold of Abraham and says, no, don't do it. Catches him and calls off the sacrifice. When we think of God, we have to think of God as compassionate and kind. It's not just that God heals the sick. It's not just that God cares for the hungry and the poor. We must also consider that God has to be kind to all people, to men, to women, and to children, and to all races, and to all ethnicities, and to all those with different sexual orientations. God has to be kind and compassionate. If we find laws in the Torah that do not have this mark of kindness and compassion, then this cannot be something that cannot be from God, and doesn't belong in the Torah. We need to, at all times, meet this standard of kindness and compassion, the same standard that we insist upon from God.